5 F&B outlets have been ordered to close and 52 fines issued for breaches of safe management measures.
Singapore will impose new restrictions on travellers from the UK as alarm grows over a new strain of Covid-19.
And 7 more people have been arrested for their suspected involvement in a rioting incident in Clarke Quay. You're watching The Big Story, coming to you live from the Straits Times newsroom. I'm Olivia Quay.
I'm Haryanto Dimana. You can subscribe to the Straits Times channel so you never miss a single episode. Now, we understand 2 unexploded ordnance were discovered on the landed property under construction at Jalan Rabu in the Shun Fu area.
Well, our colleague, Multimedia correspondent Yeo Sam Jo is at the scene. Sam Jo, what can you tell us?
Hi Olivia and Jan and everyone watching. Yes, you are right, I am on Jalan Rabu. Now this is for those of you unfamiliar with Jalan Rabu, this is a short residential stretch, just between Upper Thomson Road as well as Marymount Road. So it's a short private residential estate, as you can see around me, all these terrace houses flanking me to the left and right. And behind me, a police cordon tape. This was just cordoned off earlier this afternoon when residents were alerted by authorities. Those closest to the unit 43 Jalan Rabu, which is just right behind me over there. You can see one unit, the corner terrace right at the end. It's currently undergoing construction. And apparently those who are working on the house found a particular object. They're not really sure what this object is yet. We're still awaiting confirmation. But there is talk that it could either be some sort of ordnance, either like a bomb or a missile round. Again, residents nearest to that unit were told to evacuate. So as you can see, this is where the tape has gone up. So all the units behind this tape have been told to evacuate. We spoke to some of the residents earlier, some of them who were asked to evacuate these units as well. Mostly, this street is really a quiet residential street. Usually not much happens here. They want to go and do their marketing, they walk over the Shun Fu market, which is just a stone's throw away, or they will go down to Upper Thomson Road for some makan, right? So some of the residents here today, earlier, they were some of them roused from their sleep, when authorities came knocking to say, hey, you might have to evacuate. You have to evacuate now. We found something in the unit that's undergoing construction. So we spoke to some of them and they're not really in any sort of panic. I think they were reassured by authorities that everything's under control, and that this is not the first time, of course, that some sort of military ordnance has been found. As war has happened here before, so on and so forth. So residents whom we spoke to, pretty much still in a state of calm. As you can see, it's still very quiet. There's not much activity, not a lot of crowd. There's just some neighbors who, behind the camera here, were kind of like peering in towards that direction, beyond the cordon tape, just to get in on some of the action, and not much action apart from the fact that there are some police cars here. And also, if you see behind me that vehicle, some military personnel arrived a while ago in that vehicle, and they actually brought out some boxes of equipment, and they've been seen going in and out of the construction site. So once again, that is 43 Jalan Rabu, which we actually managed to take a look at the construction notice that's outside this particular unit. And 43 Jalan Rabu is a corner terrace house, and there's a 3-story development. They're building a 3-story development right now. According to the notice, it's complete with an attic and a swimming pool. So I guess it was during the construction, when they were, as you can see right now, some military personnel just came out with a box of equipment. We're not sure what's in there. But yeah, that's largely, what's been going on here.
So, Sam Jo,
we've tried getting confirmation from, yes.
Can I just,
yes, Olivia.
So I may have missed it earlier, but there are officials or military personnel inside the construction site, and they're trying to detonate,
yes,
or, trying to resolve this situation?
Well, they're definitely dealing with the situation. We're not sure if there's anything to detonate. Like I said earlier, it's unclear right now. We are still waiting for confirmation as to the exact nature of this object that was found and whether or not there was indeed more than one object, right? But definitely suffice to say, it's enough for the police to come here and evacuate some people, especially the units nearest, closest to 43 Jalan Rabu. And as you can see behind me, enough for some military personnel to come down with heavy equipment as well. It is still unclear because the people on the ground here are, I guess they're doing their job and they're not able to make any official comments to the media. So we're still waiting for official confirmation from the authorities as we speak. But as far as on the ground, we see military personnel and police presence, and the neighbors are, milling around but just going about their business as usual. Some of them are heading out for dinner, some of them are just coming home from work, but those that we spoke to, they don't seem very worried, and they believe that, a lot of them mention the fact that, such instances have happened in Singapore before, and so they are very confident that whoever is dealing with it at the moment, aka those guys behind me, they're very confident that whatever that needs to be dealt with will be dealt with in a safe way.
Right, thank you so much, Sam
Yeah,
Jo.
so back to you guys in the studio.
While you're over there, that was multimedia correspondent Yeo Sam Jo. Well, not many details at the moment, so do check in with Newsnight later at 9 p.m. where Chow Suen will have the latest.
Now moving on, 29 new COVID-19 cases were confirmed today, the highest daily count since September 21st. All were imported and placed on stay-home notices when they arrived in Singapore.
The Health Ministry said today's cases included 4 Singaporeans or permanent residents and 23 work pass holders who are currently employed in Singapore. Of these 23, 21 are foreign domestic workers. More details will be released tonight.
Meanwhile, 5 F&B outlets have been ordered to close. On December 18th, the Cheers Up outlet at Havelock Road was issued an order to close for 10 days for allowing patrons to consume alcoholic beverages past 10:30 p.m. on December 11th.
When officers did a follow-up check, they found the outlet was still allowing patrons to consume alcoholic beverages at 11:15 p.m. and was issued another closure order for 20 days to January 17th. An additional 4 offences were committed last Saturday.
Another establishment, One Min Club in Concord Shopping Mall, also committed multiple breaches of safe management measures, including allowing more than 5 people to sit together. It was ordered to close for 10 days.
Well, 16 other F&B outlets and 36 people will be fined for breaching safe management measures. The 16 outlets will be fined for offences like admitting and seating groups of more than 5 together, allowing groups to intermingle, and seating groups of patrons less than 1 metre apart. The 36 people will also be fined for not observing safe management measures, at F&B outlets.
One infectious diseases expert told us that this is yet another reminder that everyone should follow the advice on social distancing.
I think this has been said many times, but it is linked to what we previously discussed on crisis fatigue as well. So it is still important to keep physical distancing measures. Whether we are in phase 2 or phase 3, as you can see, there remains a risk of COVID-19 spreading. And countries that have been previously successful like South Korea, Japan, or more recently in Australia and Thailand, we have seen things go out of hand. So we've done very well as a country, and it would be waste if things got out of control just as the finishing line appears on the horizon.
Well, tighter border controls will kick in from 11:59 p.m. this Wednesday. In light of reports of a potentially more contagious strain of the coronavirus in the UK, all long-term pass holders and short-term visitors with a recent travel history to the UK within the last 14 days will not be allowed to enter or even transit through Singapore.
This will also apply to all those who had already obtained approval for entry. Returning Singaporeans and PRs must take a PCR test upon arrival in Singapore at the start of their 14-day stay-home notice.
Short-term travellers holding an air travel pass with travel history to Australia's New South Wales within the last 14 days before departure for Singapore will not be allowed to enter as well, also from 11:59 p.m. this Wednesday.
As for Singaporeans, PRs and long-term pass holders, they must serve a 7-day stay-home notice at their place of residence. These travellers will also be required to take a PCR test before the end of their notice period. Well, in other local news, 7 more people have been arrested for their suspected involvement in last Saturday's rioting incident in Clarke Quay.
6 men between 22 and 31 years old and a 22-year-old woman were arrested for several alleged offences in relation to the incident, which involved a deadly weapon. The brawlers had fled the scene by the time police arrived. Those convicted of voluntarily causing grievous hurt by dangerous means can face life imprisonment, caning and a fine. The offence of rioting with a deadly weapon is punishable by a jail term of up to 10 years and caning.
From January 4th, the Singapore Armed Forces will resume IPPT preparatory training or IPT at fitness conditioning centres and parks. The sessions will be conducted at reduced capacity and in small groups according to Phase 3 guidelines by Statutory Board Sport Singapore. And as men can start booking their IPT slots from December 28th via the NS portal.
Well, as you know, the first batch of the PFIZER-BioNTech vaccine landed in Singapore last night.
Journalist To Ting Wei was there witnessing the arrival of the Singapore Airlines cargo flight as well as the unloading of the vaccine. Ting Wei, we saw incredible footage from last night's events. Tell us more about the mood last night.
I think the mood was quite muted considering the number of people present. So in terms of media waiting at the tarmac, I think there were about 20 photographers and videographers. And then at around 7:20 before the plane, about 10 minutes before the plane arrived, we saw the minister coming. We saw the chief executives of Singapore Airlines, SATS, and other like Changi Airport Group, all these all coming to wait for the vaccine's arrival. But then it wasn't really like very rah-rah or any kind of thing, but people were more muted, I guess, because like people realized that this kind of, there are still a few more steps to take before we can recover from the pandemic. So I think when the cargo was unloaded and put on the floor, there was some like a small round of applause. But other than that, some people were taking selfies, but there weren't like any loud cheers or very extreme shows of happiness.
I see. Well, Ting Wei, we're hoping you can give us an update on where the vaccine doses are now and I guess, you know, what happens next.
So for the location, we did try asking, but it's undisclosed as to where these vaccines are being moved to, but they have been moved away from the airport already as of yesterday night. So what we know now is that Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong has said that the vaccines are the multi-ministry task force fighting the pandemic. They will announce plans on how the vaccines will be distributed soon. So priority will be given to healthcare workers and also the elderly, but that's all we know for it now.
Right. And there are also plans for Singapore to be a distribution hub for vaccines to the region. But how much could this help the struggling aviation sector, you reckon?
I think in the grand scheme of things, it's really quite a minor impact, because if you look at the tons of like the amount of vaccine that the world needs, the estimated weight for this cargo for the whole year is around 65,000 tons, if I remember the number correctly. So if you compare to what the amount of cargo that SATS handled last year alone in terms of those that require like maybe temperature controlled environments, is 300,000 tons. So Singapore is quite small, so we won't have that much vaccine coming in. And as a transshipment hub, there's potential, but again, it's not a given that people will come to Singapore. Because like when you talk about countries like Indonesia and maybe Vietnam, which might not have such good storage facilities, and in these places, Singapore can play a role as a transshipment hub for the vaccine to go through. So there's a potential there. But when you look on the other side of it, Indonesia has ordered vaccines from China, and then you can have different countries choosing to order vaccines from like maybe China or choosing to order directly from the country, like having direct flights instead of transit flights. So overall, I think like the industry has been hoping that it could give them some boost, and there's been a lot of preparations ongoing to prepare for vaccines to come. But I think overall the impact is not expected to be that big. But in this current climate, I think any kind of business or good news is like the industry will take it.
Right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Ting Wei. That was journalist To Ting Wei. Keep abreast on the vaccine distribution at straitstimes.com.
If we flash back to the first half of this year, many things about the coronavirus were unknown, including vaccines or cures for the disease.
Well, data was limited, so risks had to be taken when it came to the procurement of COVID-19 vaccines. Here's a look at the steps involved in this process.
The first shipment of COVID-19 vaccines from PFIZER has arrived in Singapore. More are on the way, including other shortlisted vaccine candidates from Moderna and Sinovac. Over $1 billion went into the procurement process of these vaccines over the past few months.
So I chair that group. It comprises scientists, clinicians, public health experts, regulators, and even people from industry who understand not only how drugs and vaccines are made, but how they're actually manufactured, to actually provide advice in terms of trying to understand how that science translates into buying a vaccine. We met 35 companies, probably more than 100 meetings over the past 8 months, and slowly we sort of streamlined down to a few that were shortlisted.
There was a lot of different vaccine technology types that were being tried. Some were more traditional, where you grow up the virus, and then after that you inactivate the virus, and that in itself is the vaccine. And then lastly, mRNA, which was the fastest to the gate. So among these technology types, we took a balance between what were established vaccine technology routes and what is the fastest to the market. Sometimes we had to work through the weekends and the nights to negotiate on the specific terms and close off the key clauses in order to make sure that we close the deal in time. Of course, HSA also had to deal with a whole lot of clinical data that they had to assess to make sure the vaccines were safe and efficacious.
Some of these companies actually talked to HSA fairly early, months ahead of the actual approval. And as each data package came along, they evaluated that.
But now we have to discuss things like, for example, for particular candidate, should we have advanced purchase agreement? Should we see whether we should bring in the manufacturing angle into play? Should we see if we can get involved in the clinical trial? And all these are possible strategies. As with all research that is involving clinical trials and other aspects, because the study is carried out over a finite period, so if something kicks in later, for example, in terms of tracking the side effects, tracking any problems that come out, that has to be very quick and responsive. So as part of the discussions with the companies, we want to make sure that once the company is aware that there are these problems, they will alert the different agencies so everyone is aware. And likewise, we will do the same. So I think HSA is really on top of this one in terms of making sure that the safety part is concerned.
What we've done was actually work with SQ as a backup plan in case there weren't enough cargo flights or flights coming to this part of the world. So SQ was quite quick to be able to work with the pharma companies to put in place such contingency plans. So I think it's not just one agency or one ministry's expertise and effort here. So, for example, MOH came in with the entire national vaccination program, which gives us a sense of how much to procure. HSA, obviously, with the regulatory leadership and ability to assess the vaccines. EDB, with our relationship with the pharma biotech companies, which enabled us to reach out early to the companies to engage them. So that whole of government effort, I think, is key in securing this deal.
A quick look at the global headlines. The World Health Organization has cautioned against major alarm over a new highly infectious variant of the coronavirus. The health agency said this is a normal part of a pandemic's evolution, adding that the discovery of new strains means that new tools to track the virus are working. Citing data from Britain, WHO officials said they had no evidence that the variant makes people sicker or is more deadly than existing strains of COVID-19. They added that coronavirus mutations have so far been much slower than with influenza, and even the new UK variant remained much less transmissible than other diseases like mumps. The WHO expects to get more details within days or weeks on the potential impact of the new strain.
Meanwhile, US President-elect Joe Biden received his first dose of the COVID-19 vaccine on live TV in an effort to boost confidence in its safety. Mr. Biden has said that he would make the fight against COVID-19 his top priority when he assumes office on January the 20th. At 78 years old, he's in the high-risk group for the disease, which has killed more than 315,000 Americans and infected more than 17.5 million in the US.
Taiwan today reported its first locally transmitted case of COVID-19 in more than 8 months. According to Taiwan's health minister, the patient was a friend of another person who had already been confirmed to have the virus. The announcement ends what was the world's longest stretch without a domestic infection.
In the Philippines, pro-police President Rodrigo Duterte has condemned an off-duty policeman for killing a mother and son in cold blood on Sunday. The brutal murders have provoked a wave of outrage directed at the government, once again casting a harsh light on perceived abuses by policemen. Mr. Duterte described the policeman as an aberration in the police force, adding that he had crossed the line. Well, those are our top stories for today. Visit straitstimes.com for more news and videos and subscribe to our YouTube channel by hitting the red button below.
Once again, I'm Haryanto Diman with Olivia Quay. Join us tomorrow for more stories on The Big Story.